Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to BlizzCon 2013. And to the World Championship Series Global Finals, we are going to crown a StarCraft 2 World Champion today. Yesterday we had a fantastic round of 16 and a terrific quarterfinals as well. Let's take a look at the bracket. Just to update those of you who weren't tuned in, where were you yesterday? Yeah, that's right. I'm looking at you. Look at the brackets and show you that our semi-final looks like this. Bomber and SOS will go head-to-head in our first semi-final. Bomber coming through a terrific bracket to reach that far, and quietly but surely SOS coming through as well. At the bottom half of the bracket, the one and only Jaedong came through to the semi-finals, and he will go face-to-face with Maru Prime in our second semi-final. Don't forget, these players are playing for a total prize fund of $250,000. First place alone, $100,000, and of course the more important thing, title of StarCraft 2 World Champion of 2013. Our schedule today looks like this. We're going to have the first semi-final very shortly. We're going to have a pre-game analysis as well from our expert panel with DJ Wheat. And our second semi-final will follow that, followed by the grand final this afternoon, this evening, US time. It's going to be a fantastic day of StarCraft 2. Talking of fantastic, we're going to go over to DJ Wheat very shortly, but before we get there, it's worth checking in with what happened yesterday. If you weren't tuned in, as I've already said, where the heck were you? These guys were here. They were ready. But it's okay though, it's okay, because we've got your back. If you weren't with us yesterday, you missed a magnificent day of StarCraft 2. This is what day one of the World Championship Series Global Finals looked like. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the World Championship Series Global Finals!
Just going to be amazing games. Of course, BlizzCon is the event of the year for StarCraft fans.
Unloading now over here. Stimming and now moving forward.
Oh, no combat shields. These units are dying really fast.
Bomber with a really nice arc there. The Marines now pushing up. And 1 minute, Widowmine coming up here. I don't think this is enough as MMA's army is being decimated.
Bomber crushes this attack. MMA put everything into this with no command center. It's nothing. I think that Moru's, he is a very intelligent player. He knows that MC is going to be studying how he usually plays here.
There's the Zealots at the front lines, and MC force fields off the ramp. The Vikings have managed to connect with the Colossus, and it looks like MC's angle is atrocious in this spot. Maru, what a brilliant way to force this engagement on his terms. Maru with uncanny reading of his opponent, preparing these heavy builds. The boss toss, who came in as the most successful SC2 player of all time, is eliminated.
We are about to embark on Soul Key versus Naniwa. Let's send over the main stage and introduce our players.
He's hitting hard right now. The force field's pretty good here from Naniwa, but the Corruptors are just going to wipe out these Colossi, and perhaps with the Hydras and Lynx here on the low ground, everything else should be taken out. He is doing such a good job.
This is insane. GG. That's it.
But even when they walked on stage this morning, just the face and the presence that Jaedong has, it's something that you have to respect and recognize. The Baneling connections need to be good here because Zerglings will not cut it enough. Jaedong's gonna cut it.
But the Marine lines keep going back and back and back, and Jaedong eats it hard. Train is coming in.
And Jaedong's looking to close this series up. And the Thor in hold position. Oh my god, it's taking all the Baneling hits. And it tanks a lot of that, but as the anti-air goes down, 2 more turrets will pop. Jaedong 3-0 rips his headset out. We've got a huge match coming up. Solkey versus Bomber.
Solkey had enough units in the main, but can he actually deal with these tanks on the high
Baneling
ground?
connections are not very good. Solkey's trying to come in from both sides, but good control from Bomber. And the Banelings all go down. Solkey suddenly has miscalculated this attack. Unreal, Kevin. He's up nearly 100 supply. The final reinforcing push. Crossing the map. Good game.
Investors arrive. Good time warp. Good bungles. We're seeing Lings and Roaches coming from all sides. The mothership core falls down. It's all up to the Corruptors to do the corruption and the bonus damage. We're seeing the Zealot Sentry Immortal get knocked down on the ramp. 100 supply to 180.
Jaedong's got this.
Jaedong's got it.
Completely surrounded.
Utter decimation of this push. Jaedong reading Deer like a book. The star senses with Jaedong when everything's on the line. Deer now plummeted down. GG!
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 2013 WCS Global Finals. It is day 2. This is the Experts Desk. I'm DJ Wheat, and I am here to moderate these guys, talk a little bit about these games. And you know what? At the end of this day, where we started out with only 16 players, or 16 players out of the amazing talent across the entire world, there are only 4 left. And at the end of the day, one player will be $100,000 richer, and they will be crowned the first WCS Global Final champion here, and a big accomplishment for 2013. Let's introduce the folks here on the Expert Desk as we'll take you through the semifinals and the finals. Starting to my right, welcome back, gentlemen. Jeff, how are you doing in control?
I'm doing well, man. It's an amazing event. So happy to be a part of it.
We've also got Todd. Welcome back to the Expert Desk, Todd.
Thank you. Really happy to be here, and I can't wait to see who will be crowned champion here, because this guy is going to be remembered forever.
I agree. And I hope we see some games that will be remembered forever as well. To my left, I've got Apollo. Hello, welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me.
It's great. It's so great to have you, Apollo.
Dude, that was hilarious.
Sentence one out of your mouth, and I just start to get giggly. It doesn't matter. This is the Sean and Sean connection.
Get the giggles, Sean. What's up, day 9?
Oh, dude. The semifinals are insane. It's like fantasy matchups back to back, and guaranteed fantasy final.
A guaranteed fantasy final. Everyone seems to be super excited for the match. We're not going to get started quite yet because we want to talk about these players. We want to talk about these semifinals and perhaps how they got here. I mean, we started this competition with 16 amazing players, now down to just the 4, as we mentioned earlier. I just want to say, of the 4 players, I want to throw this general question out here to you guys. Who are you surprised the most about not being here today?
Well, I mean, 2 names leap out, obviously, and it's hard to get past just their rankings because that ranking was determined through a season-long, or several season-long, actually, grid of tournaments. So Sulky and Innovation leap out to me, and I actually, to be honest with you, I think based on the who had to play who, it's almost Innovation that surprised me more than even Sulky, I would say.
Yeah, surprise Lebo too, actually, Zeno said.
Yeah, $50.
Todd, what do you think, Todd?
Yeah, I mean, rank 1 and 2, the two players that had been the most dominant throughout the season, not being in the semifinals, that's a huge shock to everybody.
Would you guys agree? Would the Seans agree?
I really think that the second semi, when looking at the bracket originally, should have been Deer and Innovation, right? But neither of them are there.
Yeah, Deer to me is the biggest player sort of missing in the semifinals because it's pretty hard to win any WCS tournament. I think that's fair to say. And then he won 2 in a row, very convincingly, but he just couldn't handle Jaedong, which is a real shock. You know, Jaedong consistently is considered an underdog in a lot of matchups, but consistently gets to the Final Four, to the finals again and again and again and again and again. And I mean, it's getting to the point where Jaedong is no longer the underdog player. He's really guaranteed to be one of the final bosses. I mean, the fact that Sulky couldn't make it to the round of 4, and that Jaedong could, and Jaedong has done that so many times in the past, is like really impressive to me.
I always think the discussion around Jaedong is really interesting because it's always like people talk with almost, and I do it as well, so obviously it's not just everyone else, but there's always this sense of like, he just hasn't done it yet, you know, the poor guy. He's like taken second in some of the biggest tournaments of the freaking year, and I know we're a very win-oriented community, like we very much so cherish our champions, we love them, but Jaedong's been really good for a while now, so it is nice to see it click, and now he's, again, a threat to be the winner overall, but I think he should be that final boss, and I think it's nice that he's establishing it here, but he has been a final boss for a while.
Well, let's go ahead and move into the first semifinal that we're going to be seeing here today. Of course, that's going to be SOS versus Bomber, and I'd like to have a little discussion about their play styles and how these two play styles are going to clash. I mean, there's a lot that can be said about both SOS and Bomber. So let's start with SOS because I know that everyone's had their own fair share of things to say about him, and you know, I'd love to maybe talk about the strengths and weaknesses of these players. So, who wants to kick off with SOS?
Take it away, Sean.
Yeah.
Here we go. It's all me now. Now listen, SOS is definitely the one player you would say he is not going to make it deep in this tournament, unless you're Rotterdam, because he's like, SOS will win the whole thing. But I mean, SOS is probably one of the most unstable Protosses ever. He loves to do very crazy, wild things, and particularly against Terran players, when that's the matchup where you don't do the crazy, wild, big surprises. You tend to play defensively, you tend to hold back, rely on Colossus and Templar, and warp in counterattacks. SOS has not done anything like that. He's done Proxy Stargate and Expand at the same time. He's done massive 2-2 Zealot Archon timing rushes, and wound up in these weird, dramatic games. His series against Pult was super impressive, though, because no matter how weird of a spot he was in, he kept finding new opportunities and ways to step ahead in the game. I really think that SOS, I would have said, would get 3-0'd by Bomber straight up, given Bomber's history in the matchup. But SOS, I'm starting to think more might be able to pull a 3-2, or at the very least, take several games off Bomber.
What about this side of the table? Any comments off of what Sean said about SOS?
Yeah, I think it's pretty accurate. There is a very well-written article about SOS on Team Liquid, and they talk a lot about how he likes to do a lot of different openers from game to game, change every single time, and then kind of come back to the style he likes the most, which will be Zealot and Archons with Templars, which is, I guess, a good way to play Protoss versus Terran right now. And I have to come back to a few months ago. Protoss was having a very hard time versus Terran. I was having a very hard time versus Terran. I turned to Parting and I asked, how do you play versus Terran? How are you doing in this matchup? And he answered me, you should watch SOS's VODs at the time, which in all of these games, SOS was opening with a quick forge, going into charge, getting storm, and then taking a third base, getting Colossus, getting double forge upgrades going, and then from there, he was just looking dominant in the matchup at a time where it was very difficult. So I think it's going to be his go-to style, maybe going to the first match, and I'm looking forward to see how it turns out.
And you know, definitely in terms of the way that Terrans have been playing nowadays, it's been fewer Ghosts, fewer Vikings, and just more Barracks, more Marine Marauder, and even cutting back on the medevacs to some extent. And that Zealot Archon style, as a result, is way stronger again now.
Well, also Todd hit on something that's really important too, and this is something that a lot of people, it kind of falls by the wayside, but it's actually so important when you do open up that Templar that at your third base you are going Colossus right away, because so many times we do see people, you can hit a 2-base timing with those Templar, but if you're just falling back super defensive, Terrans land that 4th CC, that 5th CC, they start putting up planetary fortresses, and all of a sudden, yeah, you've got that storm and you've been defending really well, but you don't have the aggression to push out at the 3-base.
Let me ask one more question about SOS. I'm going to direct this one at Apollo. You know, Apollo, we've seen the legacy of Protoss players, sort of the dominant Protoss player, whether that be the Boss Toss or whether that be Rain, and of course many have come after, before, and in between. What do you think is stopping SOS from like claiming that title as one of the legacy Protoss? Or do you feel like maybe he's in the top 4 of BlizzCon, he's already made it there?
I really think that SOS, when he came into this tournament, he made something so unique of himself at the start of the year. He was that guy that everybody looked to when it came to understanding how to play Protoss and Heart of the Swarm. But once people started to understand how to play the game, he did start to shrink when it came to his results. He wasn't kind of getting the same results. And I thought him coming into this tournament, I didn't even really expect to see him here today in the semifinals at all. But I had the chance to cast him against Port yesterday, and me and Autosis, we both did it, and we said to each other, you know, he is very good. He's not super solid. He has good ideas. He has great execution to these ideas, but not solid enough. He doesn't nail it properly. And having casted him yesterday, he played so well.
So solid.
He opened up so solid. He had different openings every single time, and especially against Terran players in nowadays, they always open up almost the same time, the same build and the same opening. One barracks command center first. SOS had different openings, and he was very aggressive, and he was very fast with his playstyle. For example, he'd be going Stargate openings. I saw you watching the games earlier. He'd be using the Oracle. He was getting so many SCV kills while doing everything back at home. And that's, I think, one of the biggest differences from SOS compared to another Protoss player, is he always is able to pull off these tricky moves, but maybe he's not doing what it needs back at home, is getting the pylons down, adding on his production, getting down the 3rd Nexus, and so on. But yesterday, he did everything that was necessary.
Oh, yeah. He's so dangerous in this series, I feel like, because he changes up his build. He approaches almost, and it's weird to say this, but I guess on a micro level, like an MVP. MVP does not play the same 5 games in a row, and that's part of what when we look back at his big wins, we're like, oh my God, he calls this build at that time in the series, he does this build, he shakes things up, mech, bio, and TVZ. It's so amazing. SOS comes really close to that. Of course, I don't think he has the absolute top-tier mechanics that a lot of the big Protosses have, and I think that might be what's holding him back a little bit. But even to Bomber, who I think on paper is the favorite, I think he's a huge threat to take the series just because he could line up his builds really well, execute, and then win.
Well, we've got 4 players we have to get through, so we could probably talk about SOS even longer. But yeah, let's actually shift things over to Bomber then. You know, off of what you're saying and the style of player that he is. Took out MMA, something that even Apollo thought wasn't going to happen. Of course, still a close series, 3-2, right? And then took out Sulky, and I had to make sure I just added that. And then Sulky, where Bomber said, you know, I not only thought this was going to be the toughest match, but I beat him with my mind games, and now I can take this to the championship. So let's talk about Bomber's style of play and whether or not you think his confidence can take him through the championship and past SOS.
The thing with Bomber, having commentated him so often over the years, he's not afraid to play any style. He's a player that would go against the norm so often, and with having that ability, I really think that he can look at SOS and be like, okay, this is the way you've been playing this tournament against Port if you watch the games, or at least would have heard about the games. And I think Bomber is a player who doesn't need to have practiced one style to go into a series to have to play that style. I think he will react really well to the way that SOS has been playing.
Oh yeah, and Bomber's just great at build order preparation, far and away. I think he's probably the best at having good, creative, and unique build orders. Because most of the time when we say a player has a good build orders, he's probably just doing something pretty normal and like sneaking in a forge or something like that. But I mean, we saw him go Marine Tank versus Sulky yesterday and dominate. In every Terran vs. Zerg series, he goes Marine Tank at least one game and he dominates. Against Protosses, he's the player who's still pulling out Cloaked Banshee plays. He's the player who's still opening up one base gas factory and not going for the ultra-fast command center. He actually does have a really wide range, and even when he does play standard, he's still doing little cool twists like going for 4 racks with an early expand, being a little more aggressive on the ground, delaying the medevacs. He's just extremely versatile in that sense.
Side, Todd, we haven't heard from you in a while.
I think this is a very tricky match for SOS here because Bomber, we saw in the past, he's ready to pull SCVs anytime. It could come at any time, and
that makes him really good.
If you're not ready for this, it's going to be very hard to hold. I think SOS's style actually matches up very well versus Bomber because Bomber likes to pull SCVs. He likes to go for those big timings before Protoss gets too far into the late game. And if SOS opens the way I predicted earlier with some Charge Lords, some Templars, and he gets Storm, he's going to do very well against any kind of SCV pull, unless it's an SCV pull with a lot of Ghosts. So it's going to be very tricky. And we've seen Bomber actually, Sean, you said Bomber is not afraid to play any style in particular, but I think he might be kind of afraid to take it to the very late game. So I suspect we're going to see a Bomber maybe a little bit worried about that very late game versus Protoss and trying to finish the games early on.
But surely, with SOS's style that is so focused on the Twilight Council tech, always Tempo play, he doesn't like to open Colossus. If you know this information as a Terran player going into the series, that has to give you a major edge. But does SOS change it up, though? That's
You're
the big
asking
question.
Bomber to make a lot of Marines now, and he's like, well, if I must.
I can do this.
I think it's interesting because certainly Bomber does mix up the builds. You guys talk about that, and he's very well known for that, especially in the TVP matchup. But I almost wonder if in game plan terms he looks at SOS and says, well, that's kind of your forte. You're more known for that than even Bomber's. Bomber's known for his macro, for his just mid-game power. I mean, you talk about SCV pulls, you're not doing that at 7. Oh, some people do it at 7 minutes, I guess, but more mid-game stuff. I wonder if Bomber says, I'm going to deflect SOS's opening, be it a Stargate or be it some kind of early Charge Lord Archon attempt, and then take it to the mid-game and then overpower his opening, that Twilight Council tech you guys are talking about.
But one thing that he did use a lot yesterday, SOS, was double Forge play. And that, if Bomber's going to play ultra defensive, could really change up the way the series is meant to play.
I feel like if we're doing that like cloaked Banshee versus SOS shenanigans, there's a heightened chance that SOS does come out ahead of Bomber. Whereas I feel like if Bomber plays receptive, he should be favored against SOS. SOS, that's just my opinion though, but who knows?
I agree.
All right.
I agree.
All right, well, let's, does anyone have any other comments about Bomber? Otherwise, we'll go on to the next. Okay,
Well, you know, actually, I got to echo what Todd said and what In Control said as well. Bomber loves SCV pulls.
Yeah.
Nice.
Loves to pull SCVs. I actually think that probably in 3 out of the 5 games, if it goes all the way, we're going to see huge SCV pulls. And like Bomber specifically said that in practice, he trained to do just that because he noticed that it worked once in a series, and he started to think, well, wait, can I build a style around this? And that's how we saw him go so deep in WCS.
When do we get to pull probes or drones? When does that actually happen?
Yeah, when it's just like, all right.
Here comes the Colossus attack, and he's bringing his probes. Well, keep in mind, he'll be able to chrono boost individual probes behind this.
Jadong's saving up larva. He can replenish 70 drones after he pulls all of them.
All right, guys, let's move on to our second semifinal, where we have Maru taking on Jadong, again talking about the styles of these two players and how that's going to affect this matchup, starting with our youngest player here at WCS for the global finals, Maru. And there was so much different stuff said about Maru yesterday up here, and all of it kind of came true, sort of about the styles, the lack of ghosts that we've seen overall. I mean, not necessarily going to be an issue going into this one, but I'm more curious because we haven't gotten to talk about Maru versus Zerg. So who wants to pick this one up?
I think this is Maru's weakest matchup. I mean, ignoring statistics, you look at the way he plays in the match. I mean, Terran versus Terran, he's very good with Banshee control, with his attack timings. In Terran versus Protoss, we've seen him be excellent going up with the usual big Marine Marauder aggression. Very hard to split up, but he's good at like escaping with his medevacs in that sense. But against Zerg, I've just seen him kind of do some of the more standard, straightforward play.
I really think that his play style, his aggressive play style, really can't be put into Terran versus Zerg so much. In Terran versus Protoss, in Terran versus Terran, absolutely. But in Terran versus Zerg, you almost need to be going 3 command centers. If you do anything other than that, which is non-aggressive play, and if Jadong spots it like he was doing versus MVP originally in this tournament, you will not be in good shape for the rest of the game.
Well, non-aggressive play, I think that might be a thing of other matchups to talk about. Like Maru is aggressive, and I haven't seen a lot of his TVZ, but I can't even cite the specific example, but one that does come to mind is I remember he mixes in a lot of the 11 rack stuff, so he's definitely a threat to do proxy racks, and that's always that plays with the Zerg mind. They got to be really careful about that. We saw Jadong taking risks as well, breaking away from Maru for a second with early pool against what he thought would be a CC first.
Right.
That's risky against Maru because Maru could be all across the board in terms of what his opening is. He's not known as the CC first guy. And then I've also seen him, you guys talk about his drops in all the matchups, if you can get a rhythm with your drops in the TVZ matchup, if you're hitting that 3rd and 4th base, if you're keeping the drone count low and you're keeping the Mutalisk in the backfield as opposed to forward hitting up SCV lines and stuff like that, it's a scary matchup. So this one, like on paper, I look at it, I'm like, oh, Jaedong's got a really good chance, but then I'm like, I'm scared of that. Like I should be worried because Maru kind of sneaks in under the radar and just beats people in all matchups.
Todd.
Something that really impresses me with Maru is when he's going to enter the stage, just look at the look on his face.
Yes.
Like he's never impressed, and this really shows in his playstyle.
It's true. It's actually
he's
true.
attacking all over the place. He's dropping everywhere. He's not afraid of anybody or anything, and he's just gonna look to play his best. He thinks he's the best here, and he knows he's the best here.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to stop this guy. If you're Jaedong here, you're going to need to play even better than your A game at this point to be able to take him out. And as far as styles go as well, Jaedong has had a tough time against top Terrans in the past. He's lost a few finals, 0-4.
Yeah.
So going up against Maru here, if Maru is in a very good day, I really think that it's going to be really hard for Jaedong. And
Maru is a part of the Bieber Nation, so I mean, he's of that generation. He's a scary guy, man. There's a quick story. They were doing pictures for him in the pregame stuff with the production crew, and whenever whenever a Korean they'll say something like, "Hey, can you take your jacket off?" They're like, "Oh, so sorry. Like, oh, let me take my jacket off." They said, "Hey, Maru, can you take your jacket off for the picture?" And he looked at him. He was like,
Popped his
he's
collar.
like, and then he looks to his translator and said something, and the translator says he wants to know if he has to. He doesn't want to take off his jacket. And the production crew was like, "What is this?" I mean, it's a really silly story, but
He knows what he wants.
he's challenging authority. He's challenging authing.
And he kept his jacket on. He has
did
a
take it
strong,
off, actually,
He has
but-
a strong chance to take out Jaedong in this series.
And looking to challenge the Tyrant. Now, yesterday, Todd, we talked a little bit about Maru in the TVP matchups. Talked about lack of ghosts. We even talked about in a lot of cases won't necessarily make Widowmine. We'll sometimes just focus on bio. Now, in the past, it's been something that could work, especially ultra aggressive. But in this case, we're seeing Zerg struggle a little bit with Widowmine, bio play, something that Maru is absolutely capable of. Do we see him just going with something like this? I mean, in all those games that we saw Jaedong lose, 0-4, a lot of them were Marine Widowmine in that case.
I think Maru will just look to play standard, and also one interesting thing to note about him is that he has some of the best micro out there. I've seen games, I've seen highlights of this guy where he does moves that are like, oh my god, did you just hold a Baneling Roach all in with just these few units just perfectly splitting and basically playing everything perfectly.
A lot like one of his former teammates. Well, I think he's still on the team, right? MKP?
Yeah.
I mean, he held off some pretty ridiculous stuff that you'd never think that he would be able to. Maru.
Sick reference, Wheat.
Thanks, Jeff. Sean's Maru.
I just have to agree with what you guys say. His speed, and if he's able to get into rhythm today, he could actually win this tournament as well. I mean, a lot of people are looking at that matchup and looking at Jaedong because they want to see him win a tournament, but I think this is going to be a lot harder than people think it will be for Jaedong.
I think he's completely wrong. I think it's going to be super easy. Should be a clear 3-0 for Jaedong.
Well, I actually for different reasons, do think Jaedong has an edge in this.
So we agree. The ball is
Significant,
super wrong.
clear edge. Because, I mean, Maru, you can't do early aggression. You really can't in the matchup unless you're doing something really Marine heavy like Bomber would do. Jaedong uses a really unique style of Zergling, Baneling, Mutalisk because even though those three units are what all the Zergs are going to be making an answer, how you do that varies widely. We see players saying, I'm not going to build any Banelings until I get to 22 Mutalisks, because it's all going to be Ling Muta until that time. Then only then do I get Banelings. We've seen the Zerg players maybe do some more standard. I'll build Mutas, but if I see you attacking, then I'll build Banelings in response. We see Jaedong favoring getting a pretty good amount of Banelings. He stays relatively low in Mutas, and the significant move that Jaedong does again and again and again is he builds up just enough for defense, and if you are doing anything passive, he splits on either side of the map to do counterattacks, to flank from behind. He's one of the only Zergs who does this, because it's very risky to pull all your stuff away from your front and center core, because you don't want to run that risk of being out of position. But you'll see again and again and again these counterattacks are going to be really, really, really common. And against Maru, Maru's only leg in this series, I think, is his Marine control. And it's astounding. It could carry him the whole way, but that's really his only edge, I think, against Jaedong. So the counterattacks, I think, are going to give Maru hell.
One of the things that really scares me about the matchup is that Jaedong, when you look at his successful best of 5s, best of 7s, or what have you, his series play, he takes risks. That's what a champion, his Brood War, where he comes from. That's what they do. They take risks. They change up builds. And when it clicks, he looks brilliant. The crowd's going wild. It's amazing. I think back to his series against Tasia, even at DreamHack, or even just yesterday, where he was like, okay, I went for an early pool. He didn't CC at the bottom, but I know exactly when he will not add a depot, because if he just runs straight up, it gets blocked. But if he waits just a few seconds, he will be able to get up there. But if that gets blocked, he looks like a fool. The match goes the other way, and then it's all of a sudden the momentum's going the other direction. So you almost have to hold your breath against a player like Maru, who can change things up and say, is Jaedong going to be in sync with his risks and his strategies, or is this his off day? Because he is not a player that's going to say, I'm better than you, I'll play receptive because I'm just going to outplay you. He will take risks, and if they succeed, it's going to go his direction. If they don't, it's not good.
Do you think that Jaedong's experience will play in this semifinal?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's been on this stage and bigger somehow.
Well,
bigger.
I almost think it doesn't, because Maru just seems to not
He doesn't care.
He's
I mean, like, he
yeah,
doesn't even like high five. He just holds his hands like flacidly, and people just let people slap him.
I told you, pay attention to his face
when you're younger. I
right.
feel like you kind of have that advantage. Maybe you're maybe be able to deal with pressure a little bit different. But I still have to feel like there was definitely some frustration from Maru in his matchups versus Duck, and obviously they were taking place on the other stage. But right. But
how is he cheesing me again?
But to the point where people were discussing the things he was doing, saying, and so how he was playing. I still don't think he's so invulnerable being young, and I think the experience is definitely being eclipsed by
This is
Jaedong.
one of those debates, though, that could have, I feel, as strong on either side, because certainly experience is on Jaedong's side, but there is something to be said for those young guys like Life and some of these other players that just, they don't have as much clouding their mind. They're just not worried about it. They're like, I'll probably be up here 200 more times. And then, rarely does that actually work out, but they don't know that.
All right, so on the other side, one more thing.
One more thing.
So on the other side, let's say Maru doesn't really take any effect from being on stage or the crowd. Does Jaedong gain from this? Does he not lose anything from the experience, but does he gain from the crowd? Do you think that it pushes him in the momentum?
With every pulsating cheer, it gets bigger.
Absolutely. I mean, he's said it in all of his interviews. Like, that's one of the things that's driving him. Part of his motivation.
Like a little edge he has.
All right, guys, we're moments away from the first semifinal, so we've got to get your predictions on SOS versus Bomber. I'm going to start with Todd. Todd, SOS versus Bomber, who's your choice?
I'm going to go with SOS. I mean, no surprise here. I play Protoss. I always predict Protoss to win. So.
All right.
SOS.
Well, just to keep things even, because if the Protoss doesn't win, the only thing that would make Todd happier would be to complain about Terrence. So I will pick Bomber to win 3-1.
All right.
Thank you, Jeff.
I got your back, buddy.
Yes, Apollo, quickly.
Bomber's going to win.
Bomber and Sean.
What score?
Bomber 3-2. I think it's Bomber 3-2. I think SOS, you know what? Let's do a prediction that if it goes right, we'll feel so good. Game 1 is going to go to Bomber. I don't care what the map is, it's his. Games 2 and 3, SOS is going to pull lead 2-1, but Bomber is going to tie it up in Game 4 and then win a relatively straightforward Game 5.
That sounds like a really pleasant series. I like that. That sounds really nice.
We could yap all day, but instead, let's kick off the first semifinal for the 2013 WCS Global Finals. Let's send it over to the main stage and introduce our players.
Thanks very much, guys. Yeah, this crowd here today is absolutely extraordinary. They are going to have a really fun day of StarCraft 2. It's time for our first semi-final, but before we get there, there is a man playing in the semi-final who's had very quiet work done. He's made his way through the semi-final by eliminating not one, but 2 WCS America champions. This is the road to the semi-finals of Woongjin Stars SOS. Please make some noise for the World Championship Series Top 16.
Their first match, of course, is going to be Hero versus SOS.
Darkons have a great concave, and he is going to lay into SOS with the full strength of his army. But Kevin, I don't think he's got nearly enough. Look at the army of Hero melting away.
this is SOS, and this is a very serious contender for BlizzCon 2013.
SOS. Moments away from taking a 2-0 lead in this series. Hero trying to micro with his Prism, but it doesn't matter. GG gets called. SOS has got to choose where he's going to defend. Supply-wise, Hero is way ahead, 130 supply to 106. This Nexus will go down. A great pickoff for Hero. It's been said that way before, Kev. Every probe dies in the third base. The Nexus completely exposed. Hero marches into the natural. Hero taps out.